Hi, and welcome to episode 92 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson, a PhD student at the University of Guelph, and then today I'm all alone in the studio, or my lab rather, not a studio, we're not that fancy. And we're going to continue Alt-October. We're going to talk about alternate careers for those in grad school or early career researchers or perhaps late career researchers who are tired of academia and want to try something new, as we have been all throughout October. And this week we're going to go into the world of publishing, journal publishing, which is something that we all have maybe some experience with at some degree, whether it's because we've published papers or whether we've reviewed papers or maybe we've worked as editors for papers before. But today we're going to be talking to somebody a little bit higher up the stream. Today we're going to be talking to Dr. Sheba Agarwal-Jans, who is a journal publisher at Elsevier. So welcome to the show, Sheba. Thank you very much for joining us today. Do you want to tell everybody at home a little bit about who you are and your background and what you do at Elsevier?
Thanks, Morgan. It is a real pleasure to be here. So my name is Sheba Agarwal. Thank you very much for introducing me. Well, I'm a journal publisher in biology in Elsevier. That means that I have a portfolio of about 15 journals that have everything to do with microbiology and mycology. And what I do is basically I manage these journals, but I guess we're going to have more details about that a little bit later on. So how did I actually get here? Well, let me tell you a little bit about where I've been so far. I did a master's in the United States, and after that I came to the Netherlands to do a PhD. So my PhD was on something completely different than microbiology. I was working on the cell biology of DNA repair proteins in Rotterdam. After that, after my PhD, I was already having doubts about what it is that I wanted to do next, but I wanted to keep my options open. So I went ahead and applied for a postdoc, which lasted for about 4 years. During the course of that postdoc, I thought that it was pretty much time for me to start looking seriously into perhaps something else, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to be in academia anymore. And so that's when the whole research into what it is that I want to do next pretty much started. So then I was fortunate enough to get a job with Elsevier here in Amsterdam. I've been with Elsevier 4.5 years, and let me tell you, I'm loving every minute of it. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, pretty much.
That's good. Glad to hear you're liking what you're doing. That's always the best part of it. So, so we'll step back a little bit and talk about your career. So you said you did various degrees and postdocs across the world before deciding to get into publishing. So was there any point while you were doing those degrees that you thought maybe an alternate career was for you, or did you have plans of sticking with academia until things change? Really?
Well, yes and no. So, for example, when I was doing my PhD, when I was doing my master's in the States, I was very much into still doing the PhD. I mean, I did consider it, because when I was doing my master's in the States, people in the department who were doing other things. So essentially, they were doing a PhD and an MBA, for example, at the same time. People were looking into, programming and things like that. So the idea of actually getting into something beyond just pure academics was always kind of in the back of my mind. But when I was doing my PhD, of course, you don't think about those things, because the only thing you want to think about is basically finishing the PhD. At the juncture of having, when I was writing my thesis, that was the juncture at which I started considering the idea a little bit more carefully and a little bit more seriously. But then I realized at the time that I wasn't sure exactly what it is that I wanted. I mean, that was, of course, when academia is pretty much the world that it's difficult to kind of, move further. You need a lot of energy to explore, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I very seriously started considering alternative careers during my postdoc, really. So that was really the time. I think it was 2 or 3 years in when I thought, well, now is really the time to see what else I can do with the skills that I have. And to that end, then that's when I basically started taking action on what to do and how to get out, how to network enough so that I could actually figure out what it is that I wanted to do with my life.
That's good. It seems to be the running trend is everything's going along tickety-boo until, something changes and all of a sudden people find that they have a much bigger desire to go do something else rather than, going in and planning things all along. Yeah. So as you were going through your PhD, what exposure to publishing did you have? Was it just you being the typical PhD student submitting papers and perhaps doing a couple of reviews, or were you working in some regard with journals on the editorial side at that point?
No, not at all. So I basically had the usual experience of a PhD student, writing the papers and trying to publish them, essentially. Yeah. I mean, to be completely honest with you, I did not know anything about the publishing industry until I joined it. So it was not like I had a lot of, I mean, I didn't even, I like to say, and this is not what your listeners want to hear probably, but I fell into publishing pretty much by accident. It was not considering very seriously because I wasn't sure. Well, simply did not know that I had the skills for a publisher. That is actually, the truth of it all. I didn't know what the job entailed, and I wasn't, I had no clue about what exactly publishing was until I fell into it. So, before that, I had absolutely no idea about publishing. I knew that there were publishing houses and I knew that there were journals, but as for what exactly a publishing industry is, I had no clue.
Yeah, I think that's probably the norm for most of the people, which is a little weird considering, at least in the academic sphere, your life and career revolves around this industry, and perhaps a lot of us aren't familiar with what happens once we press that submission button or accept reject.
Yeah.
So let's go over that perhaps. So maybe you can give us a little inside scoop, because like I said, we know when we submit a paper, we know that it goes off to some mysterious place and an editor handles it and sends it off for review. And sometimes we're sent those reviews by the editor, and we have to judge that paper and decide whether it meets our criteria, whatever those criteria may be for acceptable publication. And then we send it back, and then 6 to 12 months later, it apparently appears online and in print. So there's this big step between what we as academics, or those that are at the bench doing the work, are doing, and however science publication is happening. So can you fill in the blanks a little bit about maybe about what is above the editor, or at least in a big journal series like the Elsevier family?
Sure. No, absolutely. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell you a basic pathway that your paper takes once you hit that submit button and it goes into the big black box.
Perfect.
So what happens is essentially you hit the send button and the paper then appears in the email box of the editor. Okay, the editor, usually the editor-in-chief of the journal that you've sent the paper to. The editor-in-chief essentially looks at the paper and he looks at whether all the basic criteria are met. So what I mean by basic criteria is essentially, first of all, the basic thing is the paper in English? Yeah. Does the paper cover the aims and scope of the journal? Does it have something new in it? Okay. Things like, some people also they also look at essentially what the format of the paper is. So is the format of the paper the right one for the journal, for example? I mean, if the journal only handles like short communications, then if you send us full-length paper, then of course it's not going to be accepted, for example. So those are the kind of basic requirements that editors look at, first of all, when a paper lands on their desk. After that, if those basic requirements are met, then either the editor-in-chief handles the paper on his own, or he hands it over to a handling editor. Now you can imagine that an editor-in-chief, while having a fairly broad idea of what the field is, doesn't necessarily know exactly what the paper is about. So he would, probably be more comfortable in handing this paper off to a handling editor whose field it really is. Okay. So now the handling editor then looks at the paper and he essentially reads it a little bit more detail than the editor-in-chief had done, and then basically assigns reviewers. Okay, so these are the people who are going to be in the field, who understand the paper, who understand the research, maybe working in something similar, so that they can make an educated analysis of what the paper is about. So that's peer review. Everybody knows about peer review, and this is what happens. Now the reviewers can come back to the editor with various recommendations. It is the responsibility of the editor who is handling the paper to gather up all of these different opinions of the reviewers and then make a final decision. And that final decision could be reject, it could be accept with minor revisions, or accept with major revision. Or actually, no, it would say with major revision, requires major revisions. Now, papers that are rejected are, of course, rejected. Papers that are accepted with minor revisions. So these are, what we're talking about minor revisions is essentially things like, perhaps there is a comma missing somewhere, or your figure legend is wrong, or you need a couple of standard deviation bars, for example, or something like that. So those are minor things, and a lot of times these don't go back to the reviewers. So basically, if you have cleaned up the paper a little bit, then it goes back for consideration. Major revision, of course, is when you need a whole new section, or maybe you need a couple more experiments, or you need to rewrite something. And a lot of times, those major revisions do go back to the reviewers again, because they need to basically look at what you've done that is new and see if it makes sense. All right. So once that is done, then again, like I said, the handling editor takes the final decision on what to do, and then after that, once the paper is accepted, it goes into what we call production. So production essentially means where the raw form of the paper is taken into our production system, and then it is typeset, it is reformatted. The logos come in, the formatting of the paper, the column view and things like that, and then it's published online. First of all, so essentially you have, on Science Direct, which is one of Elsevier's platform, of course, it appears online there. And then as well, first of all, actually it appears as author proofs, uncorrected proofs, first of all, and then author corrected proofs. And then you can basically watch as the paper goes through the formatting. At some point it gets a DOI number, which is basically means that the paper is citable. And the last step essentially is when it receives the page numbers and the issue numbers, which makes it, basically fully citable. Of course, when it has a DOI number, it already is fully citable, but people like to have their issue number, page number. That's how it's still quite standard. So that is, essentially a very, very quick and easy explanation of what the black box looks like. Of course, there are, basically the major theme is the same. Your editor gets the paper, they go send up a review, and the reviewers make a decision, the handling editor makes the decision. But there are always, of course, theme for different journals. For example, some journals are just invite only, basically the editors only publish papers that are only invited, and in that sense, because the review process takes is a lot shorter, because you already know what exactly is being submitted, etc. So yeah, that's essentially the very, very quickly the what publication process is.
That's good. And so that takes us to the nuts and bolts of how papers come out. But how does your role with the publisher, because you're called a journal publisher, so I assume you are the step above the editor and are managing multiple editors, or at least multiple journals and their subsequent editorial panels. So what is it that you're doing at Elsevier as a publisher?
Yeah. So I do not. So first of all, let me just start off this entire discussion by saying that I don't make any scientific decisions. Okay, none of the papers that I publish in my journals have anything scientifically to do with me, because it's not my field. I mean, clearly, I did my PhD in something completely different. But so the scientific decisions and well, anything that is related to the papers is I rely on my editors to make those decisions for the journal. What I do is I am the strategic manager of these journals. So my task is fairly simple. I need to be able to make these journals the best that they can be, in terms of quality, in terms of quantity, in terms of what the journal is capturing, for example. So I basically, my job is like a spider in a web, because I am the face of Elsevier for my editors and for my readers and for my authors. Editors come to me if they have issues, if there is, from everything from major to minor issues. I troubleshoot for them. I direct them in the right direction. Say, okay, this is my issue. Then I talk to the people internally to say, right, how can you help my editor? That is on a very, very basic level of housekeeping journals. So essentially, troubleshooting, making sure that everything runs smoothly, et cetera, et cetera. However, there's another layer on top of this. I mentioned strategy. I want to make sure that the journals need to get to where they need to be. Essentially, they need to be where people are reading them. They need to be in the hands of the people that are working on that particular research. I try to facilitate that. So I create awareness of the journals. I go to a lot of meetings. So I go to a lot of scientific meetings and listen to a lot of talks and talk to a lot of people and tell them, listen, your research is really, really interesting. Have you considered perhaps, have you heard of my journal? Have you considered perhaps publishing in them? There's a lot of awareness, creation of awareness for the journals. The other thing that I do is internal facing. So I talk a lot to my marketing manager, for example. So marketing is really, really important. Marketing of scientific journals is actually a little bit different from usual, marketing efforts. I mean, we don't have, big ads or something like that. But we have to really tailor make our marketing efforts to the audience, because these are the people who are going to be reading, our journals, and of course, publishing in them as well. So there, I speak a lot to my marketing manager. Where does the journal need to be? How are we going to create awareness of the journal, this particular meeting, for example? Another bunch of people, another team that I speak to is called Content Innovation. Now, if you have been to Science Direct lately, you will find that Science Direct has actually changed quite a bit in the past 4 years that I've actually been there. It used to be the static page, there's a really static HTML, which you could just basically print off, and then you've got the copy of the paper. Now it's a lot more interactive, and you can do a lot of cool stuff, like, basically navigate between the different sections of the paper and things like that. So there's a lot of interactive element to it. So I try to see how I can integrate those interactive elements into my journals. For example, one of the things that we do, which I think is really cool, is database linking. For example, if you have cited something in GenBank, the idea is that when you are actually reading the paper in your on Science Direct, if you're reading the paper, you should be able to click on the link and be able to get to that entry on GenBank, for example. So these are the kind of things that I try to incorporate into my journals, just to basically say, right, hey, I've got this really cool functionality. I think it's going to be really, really interesting for the journal. So this is what we basically discuss. And just the basic thing, of course, is the most basic thing. It's just to make sure that we're capturing the hot topics. I mean, I'll go to the meetings and I say, right, what is the hottest topic right now in the field? I find out that the hot topic is X, Y, Z, and I go back to my editors and I say, I was in a really interesting meeting, and they told me that this was a very interesting topic. Do you think we can capture it in our journals? And that's how we go on. So my job is very much an external facing as well as an internal facing job. I'm the one who is in charge of my journals. I know them inside and out. I know the community really well. I know my network. If I have any questions, what is the interesting thing these days about XYZ, I can ask my network about it. So yeah, essentially, again, coming down to it, my job is to make sure that the journals are where they're supposed to be, reach the people they're supposed to be, have the authors that are the best, and grow in quality and quantity.
That's really interesting. So it's this weird world where we generally, as an academic or a grad student, we deal with the editor level, and as somebody who has worked as currently serves as a technical editor for a small regional journal, it's interesting to hear the next tier up on in the bigger ecosphere about how that system works.
Yeah.
So what were some of the skills that you found that you have been putting to use from your PhD in this new world?
Yeah.
What would you say you learned from your PhD? You may not be using their knowledge of the literature or the benchwork skills perhaps, but what were some of the skills that you found translated well from your PhD to what you're doing now?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Just kind of step back a little bit from that question a little bit, because I think I want to say something general about skills and alternate careers in science. I think that a lot of people who are doing PhDs are not entirely aware of all the things that they're capable of. I mean, when I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, to basically go into an alternate career, it was very difficult for me to pinpoint exactly what it is that I could do, besides the fact that I could pipette, and do Westerns and do cell culture, for example. So I think it's very important that PhD students and people who are in academia realize what their skills are. Now, coming back to your question about the specific skills, that's a really hard one, because I think my entire experience as a PhD, doing a PhD and actually even being a postdoc, has success to as a publisher. For example, first of all, one of the things that we do all the time as a scientist is communicate, right? We talk about our research all the time. We're networking with people all the time. Like, oh, this guy has a really great cell line that I need to use. So, let me go talk to him. So that's the kind of networking communication that is incredibly important in this job. I mean, I talk to people all the time. My number one priority is to meet as many people as possible and to talk to as many people as possible and to get to know them as much as possible. So communication is really, key. But I mean, other things like, and again, this applies very generally also to people who are looking for alternate careers. The fact that you're doing a PhD, there's so many things that you're doing. You're troubleshooting, you are, negotiating with people all the time. You're persistent. I mean, you basically, how many negative results have you had in the lab, right? Pretty much every day, but you're persistent because you're like, all right, I need to go back in there and I need to figure out what is going on, troubleshoot, and do things like that. Those are the kind of skills that you pick up when you're doing a PhD that a lot of people who don't have a PhD don't have. So I think it's important, the perseverance, the the fact that you have to always work in a team, the fact that you may have managed a student, or you might have, managed a technician or something like that, management skills, reading and writing skills. I mean, maybe in this job directly, reading and writing skills might not be that important, but I also have found that because I'm a PhD and because I have read papers and written papers, people kind of relate to that a lot more. And so people can talk to me, about science and about their pain points, for example, when they're writing a paper or submitting a paper, knowing that I would understand where they're coming from. And so I can go back and do something about it, you see? And of course, I am still incredibly interested in science. I mean, science flows through my veins, and I'm still very much in touch with that. People talk to me about their science all the time, and I'm just standing there hoping I understand and asking intelligent enough questions, because it's not my field, of course, right? But still, I think that so in terms of skills, I think the fact that persistence really, and making sure that the fact that you don't give up, the fact that you are still, you find it important enough. The passion is there, the fact that you're passionate about what you do, and the fact that you are, I keep coming back to the word persistent, just because I think that persistence is such a great quality in people who are doing science. The fact that you keep on chipping away at that particular block, no matter whether it yields results or not, I think is very, very important. And let me tell you, people in industry love that. I mean, people absolutely love the fact that, in spite of the fact that somebody might have a setback or bad news or something like that, you were really counting on a project and it doesn't go through, that kind of thing, and yet you have the ability to bounce back from that, I think is really attractive to people who are in industry. That is attractive, that PhD students are attractive to them, essentially. So I'm sorry, I know that it was really difficult for me to answer this question, because I cannot really talk about in terms of specifics about the skills, but I think that anybody who does a PhD has an incredible amount of about to offer anybody in industry. They just have to look for exactly what it is that they want to do, and where they fit, really.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting, because I think it's funny to hear somebody from the other side talking about having trouble pinpointing the skills that help get them to where they are, because as we've learned throughout this Alt-October experiment, and has come up repeatedly over the month, is PhD students generally look at themselves and say, well, I can use a pipette for 7 hours at a time, or I can use this really specific piece of analysis software, but I have no other skills whatsoever. So it's interesting to look backwards in time as well, and have trouble finding the same skill set that we have developed innately and subconsciously as well.
No, absolutely, Morgan. I think that, I was at that place too, you see. That's the thing. I mean, I was exactly at that place, trying to figure out what it is that I could be offering to the industrial world, to the companies. I mean, what could I offer? Because, I mean, I was so experienced, and my point of view of the world was completely closed off, basically. It was just, I know how to run an experiment. I know how to, but I mean, all of these things, I think it's very important for anybody who's considering getting into non-academic jobs, is to really step back and take a look at what they've actually done, and translate all of the things, all the projects that they've done, into the level of skills. Like, for example, like I said, management skills, troubleshooting skills, the fact that you can actually read a huge amount of literature and make sense of it and make conclusions from it and actually extrapolate your own ideas from that. I mean, that is a skill. That is a fantastic skill. That independent thinking, project management. So it's something that I think people in academia really should be able to. Basically stepping back and taking a look at yourself and seeing, okay, what am I good at? What can I do? And some of those things also, I just want to add, some of those things can come from outside academia as well. So it could be something that you do in your private life, if you organize, I don't know, birthday parties, or if you're, a great, I don't know, you like to play hockey, for example, or you've coached your son's team, for example, or something, something really completely random that can completely be translated into a skill that could really help you in finding a job in industry.
It's good. It's a good reminder for everybody that's listening to remember the context is what you make of it, and so you can always put your skills and your hobbies and likes and such into whatever context you think is going to be most beneficial for you down the road, or for whatever scenario you're working in.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned something in there that I thought was really interesting, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but you mentioned that because you've got a scientific background, it helps you connect with all the people within the academic sphere as a publisher. So is having a scientific background, a PhD, is that kind of an uncommon thing for people at your level in the industry, or is that, more often than not where people come from?
That's a really great question. So no, it's not necessary. Having a PhD is not necessary to become a publisher. There's a lot of my colleagues who do not have PhDs and are absolutely exceptional publishers. I think the most important thing is having an interest in the science, because the fact is that for example, for me anyway, personally, I'm a life sciences publisher. If I was to try to take over a physics portfolio, I would be lost, because I wasn't, I don't know, the head or tail. I don't know anything about physics, for example. However, on the other hand, I would absolutely love to talk to physicists and ask them about their research, which is what the job is, So I mean, if you, the thing is that I have a very a helicopter view of what the field of microbiology is doing. I don't know the details of it. I don't know the names of the organisms. Well, I do know some of the names of the organisms, but I don't know the specifics of what people are doing. However, I can tell you exactly what is hot right now in microbiology and mycology. I can tell you exactly what people are working on and what is getting people excited. And if I have that knowledge, I can apply that to my job. Okay. So yeah, having a PhD is not essential and not critical, but I think having an interest in science absolutely is. On the other hand, I mean, I can also say that at Elsevier, we are kind of moving towards that. These days, having a PhD is an absolute bonus to be a publisher, because you come from that world. When you're coming from that world, you can kind of understand what it is, the challenges that people face in academia. So yes and no. I mean, I think that there are, like I said, you can be a publisher without a PhD, but it doesn't, and because you have a PhD doesn't mean that you're going to be a better publisher. I think other skills are much more important than having a PhD, like, for example, communication and, networking and all the things that I've highlighted before. However, just because you are an academic, kind of gives you a sympathy, at least be on the same level at some point as, people love it when they see a PhD after my name. It's like, oh, where did you do a PhD from? Da, 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 and so you understand us, you understand us because you used to be there. So, it could work against you as well, of course, but still, it's it's not essential, but it's more fun, I think, that way as well. You can actually get you can hit a nerve with people. I think that's probably what I wanted to say. I can say, right, yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. The empathy may be a big player there.
Yeah.
Which brings us to one thing, and I don't want to get too deep into this because it's not the point of this podcast.
Okay.
But specifically talking about empathy, and I don't know. Elsevier has got a pretty big critical component to it in many realms, especially online. Elsevier has taken a lot of criticism in the last few years for various things with academic publishing. And that's why I wanted to get somebody like yourself on to show the empathetic role of how publishers are doing. So I imagine this comes down to your job as well. You said you're helping connect the public with the publication and all that. How challenging is it for you to work in the academic publishing environment, wherever it is now, and for whatever good or bad, whichever point of view people may have? And how big of a challenge is that for you to deal with on a daily basis, some of the criticisms, whether legitimate or not, of the current publishing model?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. So going back a little to what you said about the criticisms, well, we know what that is about, and the fact of the matter is that I think that well, as a company as a whole, Elsevier, we are a big company. That's for sure. I mean, we are a big company, and we have a lot of journals that we have, invested a lot of time and money in. But let me tell you something. I have never met a more enthusiastic bunch of people that work for this company. I mean, I get so inspired. So we have yearly meetings with the publishers from every field that we've got, and I have never been more inspired by these people. They're so enthusiastic and so passionate about their jobs, and we are so happy to be able to serve the community, which is so dynamic, essentially. So make no mistake about it. We work really hard, and to make sure that people see what it is that we're doing. Okay, so coming back to the second part of your question about how hard it is, well, it depends on the community, right? So there's some communities that are much more difficult in terms of dealing with this. Some people are much more critical about Elsevier. We have had, so it is, we realize, of course, it is really community specific. Now, in microbiology and mycology, it is much less so. So I still have a great relationship with my editors, and I definitely hear people talking about, people talking about publishing models and, things like that. And, it is my job essentially to make sure that people know what exactly is happening and what exactly is the truth about Elsevier and what it is that we're doing. It is my job to create that awareness as well, because let me tell you, I mean, we are doing a lot. We invest a lot of time and a lot of money in making, your reading experience, your author experience, and your editor experience as modern and as fast and as productive as possible. So in that sense, I think that, my communities, like I said, I've heard, opinions being shot around, and it's my job to make sure that I, essentially tell them, well, these are the facts. This is what we're doing. This is the kind of stuff that we're doing. But however, like I said, I know that other publishers have a much more difficult time in terms of their communities, and so, we give them as much support as we possibly can. So yeah, I mean, it's not been an easy time because, you can imagine that we're so invested in what we do. And we are so invested in our portfolios and our communities. It's not very easy to hear all of these negative opinions. But however, I guess one of the things that you have to really make sure that you remember is not to take it too personally, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And I think that there's going to be, I think that if you are any company, you will get criticism from some sphere. But no, I've been fairly lucky. I've got a fantastic community, and I've got a fantastic bunch of people that I work with. So it's been good so far.
That's good. I think it helps as well. Sometimes we as frustrated people sometimes forget that corporations are made of people. They aren't necessarily our people, despite some government rulings at times. But and the peoples generally are much more easy to empathize with than the corporate beast at times.
But Morgan, this is what it is, exactly what you said. I mean, I said before a while ago that, I am the face of Elsevier when I go and represent Elsevier at all these meetings and all of these conferences and things like that. I go to institutions and talk to people there as well. And it is essentially my job to say, well, look, listen, I mean, this is all the stuff that we're doing. And, this is what I am willing to do for you as a reader and an author and an editor. So, putting a face on the corporation, I think, is a really, really important thing. And, like I said, people respond to that. I mean, most of the time when there's trouble, when there's any kind of trouble, think about whatever, in the media, or there's trouble with the journal, or there's something that's always consistently going wrong. It is my relationship with the editors that keep the journal going. And that they don't lose faith in me, in the company and in the journal, and that is the critical part of my job essentially. Yeah.
It's an interesting cross that you've got. Trying to put on all these different hats and dealing with it. So we're almost out of time, but I got two more questions that I feel like I want to ask. So One of them is pretty simple. Do you miss the bench? Do you miss the academic research side of things?
So the first year that I was a publisher, I went to all these, I went to institutions and I visited all these places, and a couple of times I went with my manager, and I would just basically stand outside the doors and look in, just standing there for a minute, just taking a look. And my manager saw this and he didn't say anything. Yeah, sure. And the first year I missed it. I definitely did. I mean, it was like it felt like I had given up almost, and I'd given up on a thing that I had worked really, really hard for. And I think this is a hurdle that a lot of people are face as well. I mean, 15 years, that's not anything to be sneezed at, honestly. I worked really hard for where I was. I worked really hard for my PhD and also for my postdoc and things like that. However, so I wasn't at the bench doing experiments, and that definitely, hurt for a while. However, now, if somebody gave me a permanent position with $1 million, maybe $1 million, but if somebody gave me a great position, I would really wonder if this is what I want to do. I mean, I'm enjoying my job very, very much. I enjoy what I do, And I mean, I've got a better work life, home life and work life balance than I ever had when I was working in academia. And the uncertainties of where am I going to get my grant, and where am I going to get my paper published, and all of this, the uncertainties are gone, and that feels good. I think it feels like, all right, my life is kind of stable, and I can do stuff with my family. I can do stuff, and of course, I mean, this is my situation. This is, fairly unique. I cannot generalize that everything is better in industry. Of course not. But it was a relief. So yeah, I miss the bench. I still go to institutions, and I still look into microscopes, and I realized very, very clearly that I haven't picked up a pipette in like 5 years. It's like, will I still know how to use that?
The calluses are all gone, unfortunately.
The calluses are all gone, but but still, I mean, I miss it, but I don't. But on the other hand, I still have my finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
Of science, and so
that's good.
That's it. Yeah.
Good. And so the last thing we've been asking everybody throughout Alt-October is asking for a little bit of advice. So if you have one or two pieces of advice for somebody who is maybe sitting at the bench right now, is unsure of their future, is unsure whether they want to continue with the postdoc, with their PhD, finish what they want to do after they finish whatever obligations they may have right now, and are thinking about jumping out of academia and into an alternate career, whatever that may be. So do you have one or two pieces of advice that you feel are really valuable for somebody making that decision right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Only one or two, though. Number one, well, I'm going to go over two, okay? Because I think this is very important.
Go for it.
Number one, I think self-reflection is very important. I think it's very, very important to sit back and really, really look at yourself and see what it is that you enjoy to do. Because everything that you enjoy doing can be translated into a workable skill that would be important to industry, okay? That's one thing. Number two, work on your CV. The academic CV is not going to work in industry, okay? The average recruiter spends about 2 seconds looking at your CV, and if it's 29 pages long, it's not going to work. It's going to go straight into the bin. So please work on your CV. What I did was, and I'm not saying this is the only way to do something, but what I did was I essentially went to Google, yeah, and looked at what does a non-academic CV look like? Yeah. What I did was my first thing that I put down there was my skills. Okay, what are my skills, and basically had in my mind an example to back it up. Okay, so CV. Third thing, network. If you're at the bench and you're thinking, yeah, I don't know if I want to do this for the rest of my life, I think you're already halfway there. I think you kind of already know that this is something that you might actually, you want to actually start looking. So the minute you have that thought, start to network. Go to job fairs, go to, look at the different companies that you think are interesting. Maybe, I mean, in the Netherlands, we have, a couple of great initiatives where they have all these really nice seminars, things like that, where people from different industry come and talk to you. I think that it is incredibly important to network. Now, let me tell you, networking is not as easy as it sounds. Believe me, I found this out the hard way, because people will be like, I'd go to the stand and say, hey, I'm looking for a job and I've got this, that, and the other. And they'll be like, oh yeah, look at the website. Now, if somebody asks me for a job right now, I'd say exactly the same thing. However, the thing is, what you want to do is you want to make an impression on somebody. Okay, you want to make an impression. It's such an impression on somebody that person remembers you when there is maybe a thing that, a job position or something that pops up that you could be great for. The idea is just to make yourself memorable, and to make sure that people say, like, look, this is my CV, and you probably don't have anything for me right now, but who can I talk to that I can actually, think about where I can be in that company? Like, maybe I can be in a particular team, or maybe I can be in this place, whatever. Networking, incredibly important. Most of the connections you make, this is going to sound depressing, but most of the connections that you make are probably not going to amount to anything. However, the ones that you do make is the one that is going to be, maybe the essential one. That's what I found out on a personal level. So network. Find out about the industry. Talk to people. Call them up and say, hey, look, listen, can I just, sit beside you at your desk one day and see what it is that you do? Can I meet the key important people in the company, for example? I had a couple of appointments to meet with a patent lawyer, for example, before I came into publishing, for, just basically to talk about what is patent law? How do I, if I wanted to do something, I wanted to, how do I get into patent law, for example. So really, networking, I think, is incredibly important. And number four, and I assure you, I shall finish very quickly. Number four is interview skills. I think interviews in industry are very, very different from the one in academia. So one of the tips that really worked well for me, actually, because the interview turned out to be exactly like that, is the questions were basically, think of a situation where you had done something. Think of a situation where you had started a project. Think of a situation where you had to negotiate with somebody to do whatever. And the thing is that, if you Google is great also. If you basically look at the kind of questions that people ask and think about how you would answer these questions. Because you see, when you go into an academic interview, people will ask you about what it is that you've done. This is about the field and what are the experiments and da-da-da-da. Not in industry. People don't care about where you've published and what you've done, unless, of course, it is in a company which is exactly what it is that you're doing. Okay, so that's different. But people want to know how you have used the skills that you've picked up from your PhD in the real world. Okay, and so it could be anything. I mean, it could be, I took a project that was dead in the lab and basically brought it to a conclusion. I mean, that is project management, for example. So you can talk about that. So interview skills, I think, are quite important. I mean, like I said, non-academic interviews are very, very different from academic interviews, and it does well to prepare yourself for that. Absolutely.
That's great. That's very good. Great advice to hear, because sometimes we think of those, at least those looking at from the outside and into the industry, look at some of those questions that you hear about as kind of cliche, but it's very important to note that they are important and should be prepared for, and not just maybe looked at snidely, which sometimes they may be.
Exactly. I mean, the idea is that you want to show the recruiter that you are very much aware of what it is that you're capable of. And unfortunately, I mean, at least for me, I was not. And I mean, I've seen that in other people. I mean, I've spoken to so many PhD students so far. It's become a kind of a passion for me to talk to, people who want to leave academia, because, I was exactly in their shoes. And, these are these wonderful people out there that have absolutely no idea what their skills are and what it is that they can offer when they can offer so much. So, it's something that I think people should be really very much aware of themselves, essentially. So
cool. No, I think it's great advice, and hopefully everybody that's at home listening right now is taking notes and will start maybe putting things to start the train rolling if they have some thoughts of going that direction.
Well, I'll be really happy to if that is the case. I mean, I'm happy to inspire people, because I was inspired myself. So I know what that feels like.
No, that's great. And so we're out of time, but where can people find you online? Obviously, you said you've got a passion for helping people find their passions and finding their ways through this quagmire of non-academic work. Is there someplace that people can find you online? Yes. Listen in on your career and get in touch with you, perhaps?
Sure. Twitter. So my handle is at Sheba, SHEBA-AJ. And I am you can see my description, the microbiology publisher at Elsevier. I am quite active on Twitter, so if you want to talk to me, please contact me there. I'm also, kind of semi-active on LinkedIn. So if you want to talk, if you want to link me, if you want to get in touch with me on LinkedIn, absolutely, that's absolutely fine as well.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to put up the links to both of those on our website as well for breakingbio.com, so everybody can find it there. So if you're listening, go to breakingbio.com. Show notes will all be there, and you can find out everything that we've been talking about today. So Sheba, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. It was awesome talking to you about all things Alt-October. And I need to thank everybody at home as well for listening, and the European Society for Evolutionary Biology for giving us some money to help fund our little podcast here. And remind everybody at home that you can find us online, like I said, at breakingbio.com for past episodes, as well as show notes for all those episodes. And you can find us on Twitter at Breaking Bio, on Facebook by searching for the Breaking Bio podcast. And of course, you can find us on iTunes or Stitcher if you want to take these conversations with you while you're on the go. And find us there. You can also leave a comment or rating there, which helps us find more people as well and does the networking for us, perhaps. I want to thank Sheba again, like I said, and hopefully everybody enjoyed Alt-October. We want to hear from you, so drop us a line with the hashtag Alt-October, and we'll see how long we can keep going. But for now, we'll leave it at that. We're already out of October, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime. So thank you very much, Sheba. And for everybody listening at home, I hope you'll find us next week with a new episode.